Almighty God, who, in thy infinite wisdom and providential goodness, hast appointed the offices of rulers and councils for the welfare of society and the just government of man, we beseech thee to behold with thy abundant favor us thy servants, whom thou hast been pleased to call to the performance of such important trust in the Commonwealth of Dominica. Let thy blessing descend upon us here in this Parliament assembled, and grant that we may, as in thy presence, treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation, in so just and faithful a manner as to promote thy honor and glory, and to advance the good of those whose interests thou hast committed to our charge, all which we ask in the name and for the sake of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Good morning. House resumes and debate continues.
I couldn't see you.
I saw you, Sabrina.
Madam Speaker, I want to, a few minutes, Madam Speaker, to make my contribution to the bill that's before us, which is an act to create a rapid response social recovery agency, which essentially will replace the public support program and what some call the so-called red clinic. There is no question, Madam Speaker, that this program has met its objectives in reaching out to citizens who have found themselves in particular challenges and who require some form of support to address those challenges. This program, Madam Speaker, does not address the issue of permanent or recurring interventions, except if it is a matter of health care, where you go, you do surgery, maybe complications, you need additional support, or you have cancer, you do the surgery and you need chemotherapy, post-surgery. People who come for the public social program and who have a permanent challenge are referred to the social welfare system, and those persons are placed on what is called the public assistance program. But the interventions that we have to deal with, as the Deputy Prime Minister, in introducing the bill, said last night, these things are time sensitive. These interventions are time sensitive. When you receive a medical report from a medical practitioner, a consultant who says that a child was born, the child was born with some defect, and that child has to be flown out now. You can't wait for tomorrow. And because over time, the Dominican population have had difficulties in honoring their debts to the hospitals in Martinique and Guadeloupe, and the air ambulance in particular is saying, we will only accept cash. They will not even accept a check, even if you have a bank account in Martinique or Guadeloupe. They'll accept cash. And these requests, especially where health is concerned, cannot be bogged down by bureaucracy. It has to be swift. It has to be immediate. And there are other interventions which the citizens of Dominica come to make requests for. And sometimes we approve it, yes, but it takes so long for them to get the check that by the time the check is ready, this situation is null and void. It's of no consequence to them. I understand, Madam Speaker, in these things, in the politics of things, people always want to look at politics and so on and political interference. But we have to look at the bigger picture, the greater good. And we have been criticized for the public support program. People felt that it should have an independent management system. They felt that it should be removed from the office of the Prime Minister. And we took note and took cognizance of these things. And we are creating, like the Social Security, like DASPA, like DBS Radio, an independent creature of the Parliament, with its own board, with its own auditing requirements, with its reporting to the Parliament through the minister responsible, taking into consideration all of the good governance principles and practices. These things are captured in legislation. The point is, and some may say, well, it should be in social services, it should be in agriculture. But this thing, no matter where it is placed, there must be a certain robustness to it. And we have to understand, Madam Speaker, that it is not where it is placed. It is whether it is reaching its objectives, its goals. So if for all I can, Madam Speaker, we could send it to the Town Council of Portsmouth. But people who have benefited from this program understand the importance of this. And Madam Speaker, this is not only for the quote-unquote poor people of Dominica. Some people who I said yesterday, there are people who had money, but over time, because of illnesses in the family, have used up all of their monies in the bank to cause the father or the daughter or the son to stay alive as long as possible with them. And healthcare across the world is expensive. And these days, and I'm not here criticizing any doctor here or overseas, because things change with time. These days, you have to pay up front. Before you receive medical care, even here in Dominica. It is only one doctor whom we can call. I can call his name, Dr. Ferreira, who we will call and say, Doc, you know, this person came to us, you're going to do a surgery for a person, it costs $6,000, go ahead, we'll pay you. And on that telephone call, Dr. Ferreira will proceed with performing the medical intervention for the citizen. And I want to thank him publicly for that. And there are some people who believe, Madam Speaker, social intervention programs will cause people to be lazy. It will cause people to use the money to buy alcohol and tobacco. But I just came from a workshop, Madam Speaker, organized by the government of Dominica in conjunction with UNICEF, with the United Nations Development Program, and the World Food Program. And they gave me a booklet, Madam Speaker, where they conducted an independent research, because you see, people make statements, but they are not supported by any empirical evidence. And I see the member for the Central Minister is saying, you know, yes, it's true. And the subject of the research, the deputy political leader of the United Workers' Party, member for the South, is addressing the myths. Do social protection programs lead to misuse and dependency? It says evidence in developing countries show that cash transfers do not encourage work and in fact improve labor market outcomes. And they're going to say an examination of a large-scale cash transfer from 6 countries, Madam Speaker, show that social intervention programs do not encourage laziness. And it says, contrary to undermining initiatives or encouraging laziness, evidence instead shows that beneficiaries use transfers to increase their investment in productive assets and activities in an attempt to improve their earnings and self-sufficiency. Evidence suggests that social transfers create opportunities for beneficiaries to become more self-sufficient by increasing productive investment. And on the issue of spending on alcohol and tobacco, it says, to examine the issue of misuse of cash, research studies typically assess the impact of social protection programs, particularly cash transfers, on the level or proportion of expenditures on alcohol and tobacco. It goes on to say, Madam Speaker, despite stereotypes that poor households will misuse and waste cash transfers to buy alcohol, tobacco, and other temptation goods, studies consistently show no significant impact or that transfers actually increase such spending. That's what this study is saying. So it says there, the story that emerges is clear. First, the available evidence does not support concerns over possible negative effects of transfers on labor market outcomes. And in fact, social protection programs, regardless of the primary objective of the program, can improve people's labor market status, increase their participation in the labor market, their future earning potential, and also enable favorable shifts in labor allocation. That's not Roosevelt saying that. That is not the government of Dominica saying that. These are internationally independent organizations and institutions saying that, Madam Speaker. And I believe, Madam Speaker, I've always said publicly that a government doesn't only have a moral obligation to the poor and less fortunate and those who we need, it also has a biblical and Christian responsibility. And while some may view these interventions from using their own lenses as politically motivated, I can say, Madam Speaker, swearing on the Bible, that political consideration is the least of my consideration in helping these people. And no Dominican can honestly say, irrespective of their creed, irrespective of their religion, irrespective of their political association, irrespective of their skin color, or their social standing, can say that through this program, we have discriminated against them, especially where healthcare is concerned, Madam Speaker. I do not ask. Nobody can tell you. I have seen thousands of Dominicans, either in my office or when I go to the old districts to have office days in the respective communities. Nobody can tell you that Roosevelt Skerritt, Prime Minister of Dominica, ever asked them who they voted for. Never. I asked them, where are you from? What's your name? What's your telephone number? And they state their request, Madam Speaker. There are things that I will play politics with. Yes, I'm a politician. But when it comes to people's well-being, welfare, people's health, Madam Speaker, for me, there is no partisan consideration in this. And I have known of people, Madam Speaker, who I was told who were sick at their homes or at the hospital. These people, obviously knowing the political opposition to me, were reluctant to come forward. And either I went to see them myself to offer help, or I sent officers in the office of the Prime Minister to meet with them and say, look, stop behaving stupidly. You need help, my sister? And the doctor says that if you don't travel overseas to get his help, you'll die. Stop being silly. And we've provided help to these people. I'm not in the business, Madam Speaker. I've never been in the business. Even before I became a politician and so on, Madam Speaker, when you and I have a conversation, you come to me either in my private capacity or my capacity as the minister or a parliament rep or the Prime Minister, Madam Speaker. Whatever help I offer unto that person, or whatever help we grant to that person, is between me and that person. Nobody can ever say to you that I have publicly recognized people say, well, I give you that help and so on, that's what you're talking about. If anybody gets to know what help I gave you, you're the one who told them. And for me, that's a fundamental principle. So people who have come through this public service program, if their business outside, Madam Speaker, is they who put their business outside. Not from me.
In appreciation for what you did for them. So let me say thank you.
So we have to understand this thing. How important that is to people. And the member for Roseau Central, who has had the opportunity to understudy how the program functions, he has taken time to come to see, to look at the processes. He has had the opportunity to meet some people who came to my office to request help. Understand now. The policy, I invite any one of this, any one of the member or the opposition side to come to the office of the Prime Minister. Spend a day with me. Come on a Wednesday, come and spend a day with me. See how it works. See how it works. And the people who will say, Madam Speaker, well, why should a busy Prime Minister waste his time to sit down and see people? Madam Speaker, my job is about people. It's not about reading papers and files and bot files and those things. It's about people. And I believe I have a responsibility and a duty to hear the cries and the aspirations and the dreams of the people who elected me. Right. I cannot be too busy for them. Right. I cannot make time for them. If I can spend a whole week out of Dominica, why can't I spend one day in Dominica seeing my people a week? And I see them every day. I went to my constituency, Madam Speaker, on Saturday afternoon. From 11:15 to 4:15. Sat down and saw 120 of my constituents in Penville, one-on-one. One-on-one. I went to the Carnago territory. sometime last year, and I saw 167 people in a day, one-on-one. I will go to my office on Tuesday before cabinet starts at 9. I have my usual prayers at 8:45, Madam Speaker, and before 8:45, I see 30 people from all walks of life. So those who see politics and those who see parliamentary representation and those who see human beings as objects, as stones, as not having feelings, not having concerns, not having aspirations, not going through emotional challenges, that's a matter for them. But as for me, Madam Speaker, I see my job is about people. And you can never be too busy to sit down and listen to people's concerns. And Madam Speaker, in the process of engaging people, all sorts of recommendations come to you, ideas. But I have seen, and I ask myself, Madam Speaker, I ask myself the question, and usually I pose it to the cabinet and to people who I interface with. What really happened to us in Dominica? How many of our fellow citizens, how many of our family members who died because they didn't have the money to fetch the medical care overseas? There was no mechanism before. There was no mechanism before this public support came about, Madam Speaker, to provide medical support to people. And as a result of that, Madam Speaker, individual citizens of Dominica who ventured out to Martinique and Guadeloupe on their own, with no money in their pocket, no money in the banks, but who took the ferry and go to Guadeloupe, and some of them had to pretend that they fell sick in Guadeloupe in order to get emergency care. And we owed individual citizens of Dominica, owed then to the hospitals in Martinique and Guadeloupe millions of euros. Millions of euros, Madam Speaker. They owe the U.S. government, citizens of Dominica owe the U.S. government millions of dollars. As a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, the U.S. even looking at putting your list, the names of those who owe, and to cancel your visa. They discussed it with us some time ago. They wrote to our Consul General and said, look, there are citizens who owe, look at the list. We will eventually take a decision to cancel their visas or prevent them from coming on list until they pay. Because those monies have been sent out now to collection agencies. And the hospitals have written to the U.S. authorities to say, look, these caring people coming to our countries, we give them health care and they owe us. And we have to account to our shareholders. So I warn people, let us not look at this thing with our political lenses. Look at this squarely as a means of doing something to the least of our brothers and our sisters. That if we are honest about this, yes, we can recommend.
You have 4 minutes left.
We can recommend changes, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker. We can recommend changes. We can recommend changes that could improve the system. I recall the then leader of the opposition, Mr. Edison James, as the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, raising certain questions about the accountability and the transparent use of monies in public support. He launched an investigation into the public support program. He summoned the financial secretary, the director of audit, the secretary of cabinet, who was the accounting officer, the FS. He summoned all the files. All the files. So between the director of audit, the FS, and the accountant general, the CAPSEC, They brought vehicle loads of files to the Parliament, physical files to the Parliament. And they were all quizzed and interrogated on the public service program. And Madam Speaker, all the files could reconcile each other. What is in the Office of the Prime Minister, what is in the Director of Audit, what is in the Attorney General's office, what is in the Ministry of Finance. All the documents were there. And they were targeting specific individuals who they heard God help. All the files were there. Because, Madam Speaker, I make it clear to people that I am a very generous person, I believe, but always very responsible. And we ensure, and I tell the staff, even if I have approved something, if the supporting documents are not there, do not proceed with sending it to the Treasury for payment. Ensure that all the documents are there, because we have to ensure we account for the monies that we spend. So, I want to say to the South Management country, I believe that this would help address some of the bureaucratic challenges which this program has faced and other similar type programs. And I believe this is a precursor, in my mind, looking at the future, to the setting up of a national agency on social interventions, which would also oversee projects like the BNTF, which will oversee programs like the History Care program. But in everything, you start by steps. We started the program as a unit in the Office of the Prime Minister. It was graduated to a quasi-agency within the Office of the Prime Minister. We now have offices in Canefield, in Newtown, in Portsmouth, in Castle Bruce. We'll be moving one to the northeast. And now we're here, creating this parliamentary creature, this legislative creature, to facilitate our response to our citizens who may find themselves, by no act of theirs, in particular situations. And you know, a young lady WhatsApped me and said, I would like to get some help to take my mother to Cuba for medical care. I said, no problem, come to see me Tuesday morning at 8:15. She bought the documents, told me her mother is 70-something years old, has 2 bad knees, she absolutely has to do knee replacement in Cuba. One officer was present with me. I said, no problem, we'll help. I did not know the mother. The lady's face looked familiar to me, but I couldn't recall her. And then she sends me a message later to tell me, thank you, Prime Minister. I did not want to tell you who I was or who my mother is, because I wanted to test you. I wanted to test you to see whether those would form considerations in approving it. When she told me who her mother is, I happen to know he's a very good friend of mine. A senior citizen who prays for me every day.
Your time is up.
Give me 5 minutes.
Speaker, I move that the Honourable Prime Minister be given an additional 5 minutes to complete his contribution to the bill.
Speaker.
It has been moved and seconded that the Honourable Prime Minister be given a further 5 minutes to complete his contribution. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. Please continue. You would have seconded it.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you. So, the young lady tested me. I'm sure she must be listening and must be smiling. There is another case, Madam Speaker. I'm not calling names because I'm not in business calling, giving you ideas of the situation. There's a lady who is a rabid supporter of the United Workers' Party. Her husband, she is friends with Nurse Charles. And she came to my office. Nurse Charles was in cabinet. I called Nurse Charles. Nurse Charles told me she's out there. Come and bring Nurse Charles in. Just needed about maybe $39,000 US to go to the United States medical care. So, when I got into the cabinet, my office, you could see she was a bit sheepish because she knows who she is and so forth. And I approved the $39,000 for her. And we had to stay back in my office for a pretty long time because she broke down crying. And she said, Prime Minister, there's some people who told me, do not go to you. They told me, do not go to you. They told me, do not go to you, Prime Minister. I didn't ask her questions. I didn't tell her anything about her political affiliations or anything. I saw the lady there, the lady need help. And, and the only place and the only entity that could have provided her with that support, Madam Speaker, was the public support program. Was the public support program. And I could speak to dozens and dozens of instances. Dozens, hundreds. Yes, member, deputy leader of the Workers' Party. You good, you know. Let me tell you something. Handbag, that handbag will be a powerful piece of whatever. Handbag on the floor. Nominated Joshua Francis for deputy. And handbag campaign at the delegates conference and got Joshua to win, Wow. Handbag, because I know from the intelligence with the Workers' Party that Daniel Luque was already anointed. The member for Rosenau was already anointed as deputy. So nobody knew, Madam Speaker, that the member for Rosenau South had interest in deputy leadership. You know what I'm saying, Madam Speaker? Let me tell you something. Handbag. It's what I'm saying. So, we can talk about it some more time. I agree. The member for Margaret is telling me the bill. Okay. I agree with you. So I'll stick to the bill. So, Madam Speaker, the intention here is to give effect to this entity immediately. We are evicting a government agency to put the offices there. We are in the process of identifying board members who will now go to recruiting, because we cannot allow bureaucracy to bog down this thing that really needs urgent. And there's no criticism of the system. Because, all fairness to the system, you deal with hundreds of interventions on different fronts every single day at the Treasury. Contract payments, salaries, debt payments, interest payments, public assistance, NEP, and the staff at the Congress General Office is small, and people are really juggling acrobatic actions and so forth. So it's no criticism of any person, because the Congress General is very helpful on the staff there, very facilitating when you call them and so on. So it is not an issue of them. It's a matter of treating for reality. And in the scheme of things, Madam Speaker, The Attorney General's office will deal in fundamental, just 2 seconds, Madam Speaker, if you allow me, please. Yeah, that's why I tell you, you see, Madam Speaker, on my time, always. You see what I'm saying? I tell Madam Speaker, she has a different clock for me, you know. You see what I'm saying? So, it's not
can ask for time.
But it's recognizing that as time goes by with evaluation, as we're doing today with UNICEF and UNDP and World Food Program and the government, reviewing the cash transfer program, where the successes, where the weaknesses, what can be done to improve, to address the weaknesses, what can be done for next time. So every time, Madam Speaker, you see a graduation, a review of it, and that's why we're here today, Madam Speaker. I thank you for your indulgence, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, after the Prime Minister have deliberated on the matter, I wonder if I should say anything again, but I can't stand there. It would be remiss of me not to contribute on this Rapid Response Social Recovery Agency Act, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, I stand here to give support to the Rapid Response Social Recovery Agency Act. Madam Speaker, there is no structure or legal framework before in regard to getting a one-off or solving a one-off situation. I think this act here is supplementing the existing bureaucratic system of government. But, Madam Speaker, all governments require bureaucratic processes which would seek to validate and to ensure that there are checks and balances in the system, Madam Speaker. These bureaucratic processes, however, may slow down the process in order for it to get a quick response to solve the immediate and urgent needs of citizens, Madam Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the public support and relief system is not a Dominican phenomenon. It happens all over the world. Mr. Speaker, it happens in France. It happens in the United States, in China, in Jamaica. And interestingly, when I went to school in the US, I found out there that even in Saudi Arabia, you have systems such where you have social interventions either through education or health or some process, even in Saudi Arabia. And it happened close to us in St. Lucia. So it's nothing new to Dominica. I think, Mr. Speaker, where there are vulnerable persons in urgent need, I think we as parliamentarians and even as neighbors, normal citizens, we have an ethical and social and spiritual obligation to help, Mr. Speaker. But I will comment on seeing the light, Honorable Minister. Now, I always like to go back to the matter at hand. So when you look at the act, there is a minister, it makes clear direction where you have a minister who is the authority on the act. You have a board, you have executive director, and you'll have staff. So it is a proper structure, something you can see where it will have transparency. Remember when I was on the other side, we were saying, no, put structure, put a system in place. So I want to commend the cabinet for putting a system and a structure in place through a legal means, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in part 1 of the Act, Section 4, subsection 1, makes room for the process of application. So any citizen can decide to apply because there is a clear process. Under Section 4, subsection 2, it outlines the framework and a framework of qualification criteria. So again, on the other side, that is what we were asking for. So now it is there. We must support it, Mr. Speaker. And in part 2 of the Act, it speaks of an overall process or processes, procedure, and also policies. So it actually creates the framework and guides the agency. So that's what you really want. So even if a member on the opposition side, a member, let's say a parliamentarian, find himself or herself in difficulty, you want to know that there is a process. You don't necessarily have to come to a minister, but there is a process and an agency in place to take care of you. Because the Prime Minister mentioned, earlier and yesterday, where sometimes we think that maybe we are well-to-do and nothing will happen to us. But sometimes, God forbid, we find ourselves in some serious difficulty where cash, our only little asset, and cash cannot help us enough. So we need help from the government system. So that is why I said yesterday, Mr. Speaker, that when we are deliberating and delivering in this honorable house, we must be very calculated with what we say, because it will come back and haunt us. That is why I'm very careful every time I speak on the matters. So, well, Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't give him a slight tackle today, so I'll leave it alone. So, Mr. Speaker, if we move to the first schedule, I know some members commented on the first schedule yesterday, so I just wanted to give a practical response under the first schedule, but I'm going to just focus on one or two items. On the housing, and before I say that, I must say, now that I have been exposed to the system, I see the actual reality of the system. You see, let me just tell some of the members of the opposition again what, while I was a member of the opposition, what I would do before debate. I would go to certain senior members of the public service, like touch base, quiet, with a PS. Let's say, for example, we're dealing with that act. I would call the PS. I would say, give me some guidance on the matter, some explanation on the matter. So what I did, although I'm exposed to the system, I go again in the system and discuss with people driving the process. That's what you have to do. So imagine under the schedule, it have like an area called housing. It have on first schedule, health, education, micro business. But remember, it is about quick response. Quick response is not to deal with the normal process. So imagine there is a man or a lady living with a spouse, and that spouse is responsible for paying the rent. But you leave that full responsibility to the spouse to pay the rent. But the spouse is not paying the rent, but you don't know. Then the landlord comes to you and say, well, you owe in 5 months. You are a single mother or a single father, 3 children. What do you do? Remember, it is the same government who has the responsibility for housing. So do you now say, well, I am not going to worry about the rent arrears and let the landlord kick you out with your 3 children, but then the same government have to find a house for you. So the most prudent thing that the government should do. And when I'm talking about the government, I'm not talking about members of cabinet, because we're talking about an act. The government meaning the system. The most prudent thing to do is to solve the person's immediate problem, because that will put the mother or the father under stress. So you have to solve the problem. No. On the health. Examples. That's one I actually, since I've been minister, I've faced. A young lady come to me, I know her. She grew up in Roseau. And she's young. She comes to me and say, Zeke, you know, I have a problem there, a serious problem. I say, what's the problem? She said, well, I've been diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. And I need immediate help. What do I do? Do I say to her, well, let's send it through the normal channel? Remember, I'm not a doctor. She brings evidence of what the doctor is saying. So in a situation like that, what you want is a rapid response to solve her problem immediately. Let's look at education. I'm just going to give a simple example. There's a normal process that, let's say, you receive a scholarship or you get help from the government. And you're going through the normal process. So you apply and it takes a lot of time. It goes through the bureaucratic approval process. Nothing wrong with that. But imagine that as a student overseas, something happens. Where, for example, you were supposed to have cash and somebody break and open your apartment and you lose the cash. What should the government do? Allow you to starve? No, you need again a rapid response system. Let us go now to micro business. I'm going to give you another practical example again, because remember now I'm in the system. So a young lady comes to you and she's self-employed, doing little catering. She has a daughter. She has a daughter, and suddenly the oven she's using to bake fails. Remember, it's an equipment. I mean, even when I was working in Colgate Palmolive, sometimes you don't plan for a machine to break down, and machine just break down on you, and then you have to send for spare part. So now imagine she's employing one person herself, but she has responsibility for children. But imagine a different scenario where you have a business, you're under pressure of cash flow, and one of your machines break down, and you employ, let's say, 7, 10 people. So the government tell you, well, run for a loan, or the government should tell you, okay, try to process the loan temporarily, we'll do a quick fix for you, so you can send for the part and solve the problem. So these are just some simple, basic examples. Practical examples. Yeah, practicality. So having studied the system and having seen empirical evidence, I'm satisfied that we need to set up a formal and legal structure which will create permanence to such a social innovation in Dominica. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I stand to give my support to the Rapid Response Social Recovery Agency Act. Madam Speaker, the public support program within the Office of the Honorable Prime Minister is an important safety net, a program that continues to protect families and individuals and help them recover from economic shocks, natural disaster, and crisis. It is one of the most impactful programs in Dominica today that has resulted in saving lives and responding to grave, unforeseen circumstances. Madam Speaker, the reality is that there will always be those among us who are underprivileged, who do not have the means as obtains in any society. All societies will have people in need. And crisis is a reality of everyday life. Madam Speaker, I heard the senator on the opposition side lament that this program exists because the government has not ensured people's economic development. So very far from the truth. I mean, I know some of us have memory pool, short memory. But you cannot just support an Eastern Caribbean credit guarantee scheme and immediately after forget the significance to the economy. But Madam Speaker, we all know that even if, Madam Speaker, also we know that even if we are working and saving a little something for wet days, or even when we are insured, one event, one instance, one major medical cost can bring us on our knees. The reality is, Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the members of the opposition sitting here do not seem to understand that health and medical care is very costly and can even be prohibitive. And then usually, immediate action is necessary. Frequently, whether we are working people or not, the required resources are unavailable or inadequate, our personal resources that is, for many families to take care of their health care when most needed. Madam Speaker, this is the reality. The reality is that the ordinary man or woman, including the working class or even the middle income, the well-to-do, often cannot afford to meet health costs and need government support. We have seen it time and time again. Madam Speaker, again, another reality is that most of us with a steady job, we are encumbered by a mortgage, a student loan, a business loan, and at the time of crisis may not be able to face a loan at all. Madam Speaker, this is the reality. And in cases like that, what do we need? We need government support and a rapid response. Madam Speaker, another reality is that we have an estimated 38% women-headed households in Dominica, where many times these parents are fully responsible for family needs. So I ask the opposition, what happens when this family, already in a disadvantaged situation, has an urgent need or are in crisis? Madam Speaker, if I am permitted, I would like to read a message received just yesterday by phone. No, I will not be saying the name. It says, "Hi Rosalind, how are you? I was wondering if the government has assistance for homes destroyed by fire. My house was completely burned on Saturday night. Last year, my husband died, and it has placed me in a difficult situation where I was unable to meet insurance costs. So right now, okay, right now the person is in need, and that is an everyday thing that happens to us. Mr. Speaker, this is something that we experience day after day. Mr. Speaker, I can share other recent happenings or experiences that paint the reality of people's situation, which without public support would really crumble. A mother in a situation where she has to urgently leave her home because of abuse of a child, unable to meet the deposit for a rented home. And we know that Currently, the housing situation is where you can hardly get a home to rent. The person even had to rent in a community outside where they used to live. What do you do in a situation like that? In a situation like that, this mother needs a rapid response to her situation. Another recent incident is that a person who received public support traveled overseas, but because of the time that it took before they get the support, the situation had worsened. When they traveled overseas. On arrival, it was realized that the person needed a specialist and even needed added resources before the intervention could be conducted. In a situation like that, we need a rapid response. Madam Speaker, repeatedly, we hear the opposition say we should not sideline Marigot. The opposition leaders say we should not sideline Marigot people. But I recall, Madam Speaker, that through the public support system, the first beneficiary of government's pilot health insurance scheme targeting single mothers with infants was from the community of Marigot. And Madam Speaker, again, it was an issue of saving the life of this infant. But obviously, the member of Marigot knows nothing about the people he represents. He is not integral to addressing issues affecting his constituents, or pretends not to know or even care. Madam Speaker, I heard members of the opposition ask, why micro-business? What is the urgency? And my colleague here, the newest minister, indicated an example of where urgent response is needed. And I say, well, we think alike. Madam Speaker, imagine a young entrepreneur, a manufacturer, an infant industry, working on an order to supply some products, and at the most critical time, his equipment or machinery breaks down. He has a deadline. He's at risk of not only losing his client, but a little market opening. He does not have the cash to purchase the equipment. He may be unable to get a loan at the time. This is his only livelihood. He may have one or two employees depending on him, and so too are their families. Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, is it a rapid response needed in such a situation? Indeed, it is not a health issue, but a bread and butter issue that we who are on the ground understand. This is a situation that we sometimes encounter at the Ministry of Commerce, Enterprise, Small Business Development. But the current system might be unable to respond in a timely manner. Mr. Speaker, when the opposition speak, they speak as though there is no link between the social and economic situation of citizens, as though they are distinct from each other. Madam Speaker, when we address the social standing of members of a family, for example, through support to education, a social construct, we are really transitioning that individual or family to a better economic situation. We are alleviating poverty. Madam Speaker, this is just one example of the linkage, but those who understand society know that the socioeconomic linkages apply throughout life. And Madam Speaker, the records will show that this is the government that have invested the most in education to benefit the ordinary people of Dominica. So when I listen to Senator Monel Williams, I ask myself, where has she been? In Wonderland? Madam Speaker, much of what we are talking of, what the public support program has been responding to, is basic human rights issues. We are talking equity, access to healthcare, access to education, access to opportunities in a timely manner to address human rights needs. It doesn't mean that because you cannot afford personally to meet the critical needs of yourself and your family that you should be left to die. We as state has a responsibility. We have an obligation, not to some, but to all. Madam Speaker, the public support program has been working for the people of Dominica. It has impacted positively on many individuals and families in Dominica. But what we need to do and what we are seeking to do with this act, with the establishment of the Rapid Response Social Recovery Agency, is to improve delivery, increase efficiency, is to respond in a more timely manner, to get even better results, especially when we so often encounter situations of life and death. Madam Speaker, in everything you do, there is time to take stock and to amend as necessary, and that is what we are doing. And Madam Speaker, and Mr. Speaker, we are doing so at a time when this change is most needed, when many have lost their livelihoods, when they have lost their income, when they are facing extra burdens brought about by Hurricane Maria. So, Mr. Speaker, I understand the opposition is in their own world of negativity, a world where they see nothing positive for the people of Dominica. But please, let us who are in touch with the real world, this caring and loving government under the stewardship of our beloved, caring Prime Minister, continue to take care of the needs of our people. So, Mr. Speaker, I strongly support the Rapid Response Social Recovery Agency Act being presented today and necessary to expedite the delivery of resources to our Dominican people at the time they are most in need of our support. The public support program have been receiving tremendous blessings and prayers from those it has impacted, and it can only continue to exist and thrive for the benefit of all. If according to the opposition it is a red clinic, we want to make it a bright red clinic. Thank you, and I support the Rapid Response Social Recovery Act.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me first of all say 100% I support the Rapid Response Social Recovery Program. Now, Mr. Speaker, agency. Mr. Speaker, I listened to the opposition yesterday when they shared some of their points and views on this agency, and I was really shocked, and I want to endorse these statements by all the colleagues on our side here, as well as the Prime Minister and Honorable Isaac, who put some serious light on this program. So I'm not going to go over what was mentioned in their delivery, but just to add a few words to this act and to give some meaning to my understanding of it and the importance of it. But just to come back to the debate and just to clear up some of the, well, it's their opinion really, so I cannot call it anything else. The opinion shared here. I was very, very concerned yesterday when I listened to Senator Williams, a young lady who has a family, parents, and everything, just like all of us here, and to refer to it in a manner whereby it was degrading, it was trickery by the government in terms of trying to fool people. I felt bad. I felt bad. Because, you know, dealing with reality and what we are faced with as representatives for the people, of the people, and what, relax, this is true, what we suffer and what we experience on a daily basis, and what you're exposed to in terms of people's secrecy and their privacy, and the experiences, which we have kept very private, I must admit, because we are faced with a lot. I have a medical background, so some of the things I'm faced with sometimes I can understand it. But I imagine for people like some of our colleagues there, you heard Mr. Isaac say this morning that he's not a medical doctor, and that's true. Dr. Darrow has experienced a medical doctor. I understand health because of my background as well too. People come to you as the last resort sometimes. They don't really want to come, you know. But because some things are so private, but they come to you. So how can you refer to that as trying to bribe people or fool people with such an agency? The Red Clinic, as it was dubbed, the public support program, has been a program that this government brought into full force, full street, and it has been helping. People have come to us, you know, because things are tight. They're not as, the poverty, you know, and whatnot, they're down a little bit. Not because of the system, you know, that's just how some of us were born in life. Some of us probably have a little more, some of us are under pressure. But all of us must die, and most of us will give birth to little ones. And they will get sick, and our parents will get sick, and we must help. So when a lady comes to you, or a young person comes to you, anybody comes to you, and they request from you some help because they cannot afford. I mean, we don't like to call names, as you heard Honorable Paul a while ago, read a letter out. I have a lot of letters like that myself, but I don't call names. But just recently I was charged with, experienced somebody coming for help again. And they really cannot do it on their own. And if it's not for the interventions of programs like that, they will die. We only have once so far that we're going to pass through on earth. And of course, we all will go to the great beyond, and we want to open the pearly gates and get inside there too. But we have to do well on earth. Yesterday, and Mr. Speaker, this has to do with emotions in terms of the program here, which is the act. This has to do with emotions in terms of health and conditions that people suffer sometimes, and it brings us a certain emotion in them, and we cry and whatnot. I mean, I've cried a number of times. That's a joke. To cry is natural. Well, I won't cry here, but I mean, I cry sometimes, you know. No, man, that's true. And I listened to the honorable member from Marigot yesterday. And Mr. Speaker, this is in reference to emotions in terms of this actor. I listened to the honorable member from Marigot yesterday, Mr. Linton. And I felt what he was feeling. Really? Yes. I'll tell you why. It reminded me of the same thing that, no, it's not tricks. I felt him for once. No, listen, yes, sir. Mr. Linton yesterday felt a certain way when he was shocked that the Honorable Prime Minister had given him extra time. It was almost like declaring a national holiday. No, Mr. Linton, that's not how we are on that side. We meet people, we represent people, we help blue, green, red, anybody. And they come to us. When people come to us, as you heard the Prime Minister say, we don't ask you what party you support. I've always made it clear in this house that when it comes to all things generally, but in particular, education, health, and agriculture, we don't play games with that. We cannot play games with that. We cannot. No, there's a little misunderstanding on your side there. We can't play games with that. So I felt for the gentleman, and I want to say to Mr. Linton, I understand the problems on our side here in terms of, sorry, the leader of the opposition, I apologize for that, Mr. Speaker, I really apologize for that. The leader of the opposition, I apologize for that. But we have a pretty strong side here of representation, and we care for people. God forbid, and really forbid, if I were you, the members of the opposition, what I would do, I'd embrace this agency here. I would embrace it. You know, just in case God forbids, and you were to be there ruling the country, you would have something great to help your people. But you all sit on the other side, condemn the bill. I said, God forbid, don't forget that. You're condemning this bill here, which is an agency that's going to help people. But if you all were in our place, and people were to come to you to ask you for help, you would see what we are talking about and what we have been experiencing. Now, the issue here is, I heard Honorable Senator mention about, Senator Williams mention about a failed government. The government has been in power for a long time. This is the only government to date who have looked after its people. This is the only government who have put programs in place to help everybody. And this is not for rich or poor. When you get sick and you have a bill of $300,000-$400,000, where are you going to get the money from? And that's life. Once on earth you promise that. Gentlemen, ladies, think again. And those of you who are going to come next to speak, let me caution you. Be careful of how you speak about this, because this could be the very same thing that may help you.
That's right.
And maybe save your life. Do not play with that. This is not political. It's already tested through the Red Clinic, as we call it. The public support program, it's tried, it's tested, and it's proven. It's there. But we want to make it better now and make it less cumbersome. Because I'll tell you why. I am waiting for some resources from it to help some of my folks who are not well. And it's taking a little time. Really and truly it's taking some time. Because it's so important and so and so important and something that we need so much for our people that it's really burdensome right now. So we have decided to take it away from the normal, as you said, the bureaucracy, and bring it into an agency where we can approve things rapidly. And not in no kind of political program, because we do not ask the folks who come to us what color you support. We don't do that at all. So I just thought I had to make it clear and to sound a word of caution here to you, to make sure that be careful what you say about this agency. Be careful with that. Be careful with that. That's not a joke. That's people's lives. That's the welfare of people. That's people's survival. Do not play with that at all. And I said I wasn't going to be too long today, but I just want to make sure that we understand that I would put my full support behind it and declare and to sound the word of caution to the opposition, again for the last time, be careful with this criticism of this agency, because it's something that's for the future and it's something that's going to help the people of Dominica. I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, support for this bill is a given. And I therefore give my unwavering support to this bill. Mr. Speaker, the key term in this bill is vulnerability. The key concepts that this bill speaks to: accountability, equity, transparency, and collaboration. One may say it's the same based on your perception. If you're myopic in your vision, then by this very nature, you will be unable to understand what is being debated here. Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, it was in 2016 that the members of the opposition was practically screaming about the public support program, what they termed the Red Clinic. They said that the system of operation was in competition with the social programs that existed in the Ministry of Social Services, Family and Gender Affairs then. Programs which required a process to be followed, which resultant factor could be death because of the bureaucratic nature of the programs that we had. You have to apply, go to the PS, it goes to a junior clerk, somebody leaves it on their desk, and that kind of red taping, the person could have time die, buried, resurrect. Mr. Speaker, while we were busy finding ways to better assist the vulnerable among us, some people were busy finding ways to extract from these vulnerable people the little that they have. But this is not the way we operate on this side. Mr. Speaker, it's amazing to see, when you see the various PAL reps running around, trying to bring comfort to the plight of their people who have to be airlifted, people who are sick, people who suffer loss through no fault of theirs. Case in point, the Silver Lake fire. That very night, if this program did not exist, then where would we find the money immediately to bring a compassionate allowance to these people? Mr. Speaker, thanks to the public support program, we were able to help our people. Mr. Speaker, this bill, which we are about to pass and enact, has a process, and that's what they were clamoring for. Where is the process? And so we are bringing it. So please just don't oppose for opposing sake. It must be vetted. You must have an application which must be vetted. There's a part in it where you have to establish veracity of the program. You can't just come and say that's happening to you. There's a part which establishes veracity. There are checks and balances at every key stage, and it strengthens the collaborative process. Because in the various ministries identify here housing where needs apply. For example, in the fire situation where we have to give help to the people who needed housing assistance, medical assistance, educational assistance, as expounded by my colleague, Honorable Isaac Joseph. And, this consultative process is being strengthened. It eliminates lobbying. There's a part in this, part 2, section 7, where if you have an interest, you're not supposed to be taking decision. I remember a case, something happened where lobbying, because the member of parliament or the representative had some interest in something, in spite of the fact that the person left the room, the person, before leaving the room, said, remember where my interest lies. So that's a case of lobbying. But this one eliminates the lobbying process. Mr. Speaker, there's a disclosure point in the whole thing, again, which speaks to transparency and accountability. Because what we find is that people, they double dip. And this program is tightening that kind of process so that if you have gone here to get, the system will capture all that. So it would say how many times you got whatever assistance, and you will not be able to double dip or triple dip or do whatever. And the first schedule, it incorporates the ministries where most requests requiring rapid response stems from. Mr. Speaker, in everything in life, there are ups and downs. We never know when good or bad may strike, placing us in the most vulnerable position in our lives. Mr. Speaker, I had a constituent. Their mother was diagnosed with cancer. It was rapid in the diagnosis. It was just a deep down. And the children were trying. They didn't understand the extent. It was far gone. But as children, no child wants to lose their parents, no matter how old or how young. No child wants to lose their parents. And they had to travel to Trinidad. There was a doctor, somebody made contact for them. There was a doctor waiting. The doctor had a schedule because it was a specialist doctor in that area, and they hadn't got the funds. We had to come to this support program. Thank God for the support program, that we were able to get immediate assistance. And what happens in the support program, even if it's a Saturday or a Sunday, the program will assist you in getting the necessary funds once it's an emergency. And that's what rapid means, fast, with speed. And the people were able to go to Trinidad and put extra life on their mother's health, so they were able to have their mother with them for a longer period. Mr. Speaker, I think Maria came to break all barriers. Those of us who felt insulated saw our nakedness. There was no discrimination between rich, between poor, between black, between white, red, blue, yellow, green. There was no discrimination. Maria touched everyone at different levels, some more extensive than others. Some people lost everything. Some people maybe could go to their bank accounts and get some level of money that they had saved to maybe replace things that they needed immediately. But there were those people who lost their stoves. They couldn't cook for their children. They couldn't cook for their families. And these people, they understood the Maria situation, but then there came a time when they couldn't take it and they needed support to at least get those basic items. And through the domestic use program and the support program, some of them were able to get a little stove just to have their food, a little, something, clothes. Some people lost everything. Though we got ration and clothes, but they needed some immediate things for their family. And so this program helped in many, many ways to these people. And Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, this government listens because in life you have to assess, reassess to see if things are working. And Maria taught us that we needed to reassess certain things. Let's make it better, because the situations that existed showed us that no, we have to tighten up. We have to make that support program a more rapid response program. UNICEF came to our rescue, and that's why we had the opening this morning. in the cash transfer program. And some people, they wanted it to be a rapid response program also, so that they could place money in people's hands, that they could have the power, because human dignity, all of us in life, all of us believe in our human dignity. And so they wanted to maintain that human dignity, this human part of people. And they came in with the fast cash program. They said in their report, the workshop that we had, no intervention is likely to be better across all these dimensions that they're researching. Permit me to read, Mr. Speaker. And research stresses multiple trade-offs. An agency might be able to achieve a better targeted response if it conducts a needs assessment at the moment of a crisis. But this may reduce timeliness of response. So what works better will always depend on the context in which it is. So it's not this agency that's been set up. It's not for that I see a bed by courts and I need it, so I'll come to that agency to get it. Or I see I want to change my fridge, I'll come to that agency to get it. That is not what it is intended for. And the opposition should really be happy that you all spoke about, the process in which things were done. And so we are doing things better. It's also in a response to the comments that you made. So I think maybe you all should support it, as I stand here to support it, to say thanks to my many constituents who have benefited from this program. It has saved lives for me. I have a case now in Guadeloupe, a young man just couldn't walk, found out he went on his own, he had his little savings, and because of the urgency of the situation, he had to go to Guadeloupe, only to find out he has some cancer of his spine or something. But his money is over, and he needs immediate payment. And so that system is helping. And Mr. Speaker, we are caring government. We have a heart. Some of us don't even wait for the government to help because of our nature. We put our hands in our own pockets and we help based on the situation. And so I really want to support this, and I'm very glad at the processes that will be incorporated to ensure that accountability, transparency, and equity are the key terms that will be used to make this program work. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me say, I want to say a few words on the bill before us. And I'm very happy how the Minister of Social Services closed her contribution with equity and ensuring that people. But, Mr. Speaker, looking at this Rapid Response Social Recovery Agency, every member on the government side that spoke made mention, the examples came on the health. And I want us to understand on this side, we are not against the government providing assistance to Dominicans. We have never said we are against it. Madam Speaker, we spoke about processes. But this rapid response, I want us to look at the first schedule, Mr. Speaker. The agency may consider requests for support or relief related to the following areas. There are 7 areas. And I see only 2 areas that you need rapid intervention. Number 2, health. And number 7, recovery from natural disaster. Number 1, home repairs and drainage improvement. Rapid response. Even though fire, families outside, Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, you have to ensure that you do the plan properly and build a home for the person. You'll talk about 3-4 months. Yes. Fire is a disaster, Madam Speaker. That will fall under recovery after disaster. Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, education. Education. We send our students away to study, Mr. Speaker. They go to different areas to further themselves. And we like to see that happen, Madam Speaker. But the government, before they even leave, Dominica, Mr. Speaker, the government give them a commitment that they will give support. We haven't got to let that situation reach a crisis for us to speak about rapid response. We should be able to know, have a database of where we have our students, how much we are owing, and how we can give them the support. Mr. Speaker, and that is what we're talking about. You have the tuition, you have rent, you have everything. They might fall sick. Yes, our student might fall sick. That is health. Again, Mr. Speaker, every member on the government side spoke of health. We are not against it. We are not giving support to our people. But we are not going to create an agency like we are creating a welfare state. We want our people to get the assistance. We are not against it. But why, Mr. Speaker, do we want to bring poverty alleviation, micro business? There's a small business department already. And the Prime Minister, somebody has spoke highly of the gentleman, Mr. Stevenson, heading that department. There is a process. Let us utilize it. Let us empower them. Give them the human resource capacity to work in the best interest of our people. Let us not create a welfare state, Mr. Speaker. That is what we are creating. Let us empower our people. Yes, people will need assistance. Yes, people will need help. But let us not create that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, access to water or sanitary facilities. Are you calling that rapid response? Yes, after the hurricane, Dawasco had to do X, Y, Z. Mr. Speaker, I know you work at Dawasco to ensure that people get water, but you're calling that rapid response? Mr. Speaker. And that is why I said, Mr. Speaker, early on, we are not against the support that we're getting. We have the welfare department. Are you telling me that we should just close the welfare department and send everybody home? Mr. Speaker, you will not empower this, ensure that the welfare department get the financial resources and the human resource capacity to do their work. Yes, Mr. Speaker, they are case workers. You have doctors, you have whoever will give the support to ensure that it's rapid. You get that information from them. It's 1, 2, 3. But overall, to create an agency, Mr. Speaker, that is where. So you're going to tell me everybody, every week you're going to have hundreds of Dominicans that would like rapid response. Let us think about it. Let us think about it. We are not against people getting the support they need. No. Not on this side. I will never be against anybody getting support. I will tell you, Mr. Speaker, a few years ago, I will tell you, Mr. Speaker, and the Minister for Health can tell you, some young men, 2 young men was there in an accident maybe 2 years ago, and I messaged him to see if he can assist the young people. I communicated with him because we wanted to get the young men some assistance. That is health. Again, it falls under health, not housing, not education, poverty alleviation. Poverty alleviation is a process. It's a process, Mr. Speaker. NEP can start someone and move them on to something permanent. That's the process. Job training is a process. You empower the person to give them skills training. That's why I call on the Minister for the Para for Maho. How can we utilize the Nehemiah Comprehensive and create there to have some training for skills for young men and women, empower them, poverty alleviation. How NIA, the youth in agriculture, how do we empower them and get our young men and women back into agriculture, make agriculture sexy again? Poverty alleviation. Mr. Speaker, That is what we are talking about, you know. We are not against the support, but how can you have poverty alleviation on the rapid response? I want to understand that. No, I'm not vexed. I am trying to understand that. As Mr. McIntyre said, I'm passionate, or emotional. Emotional. Huh? The minister. So, that is why, Mr. Speaker, but what happened recently? But, Mr. Speaker, I want to bring that into context as well. Recently, we had a cabinet reshuffle. And the Ministry of Housing is under the Prime Minister. The former Minister of Agriculture is now a minister in that ministry. And you're talking about rapid response. No, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just bringing up a point about how, Mr. Speaker, we're going back, Mr. Speaker, housing repairs. Mr. Speaker, housing repairs. Mr. Speaker, you have a lot of building materials. We are a few more days before the rainy season. I'm not calling it the hurricane season, the rainy season. It started raining. And you have a lot of people, rapid response. The material we have there, Mr. Speaker, that should be in the hands of the people who got affected. That is rapid response. The materials we have at Longhouse, at the Windsor Park, at G-Meet, the steels in the yard of Public Works, they should be in the hands of Dominicans right now. Rapid response, Mr. Speaker. And that's what we are talking about. We are not against people getting the assistance, but how it's been done. And when that list, by Mr. Speaker, I want Dominicans to understand where we are, and I'm going to repeat it for them to understand. First schedule under this rapid response, Mr. Speaker, and I'll read it, I'll take my time. The agency may consider requests for support of relief relating to the following areas. 1, house repairs and drainage improvement. 2, health, free education. 4, poverty alleviation. 5, access to water or sanitary facilities. 6, microbusiness. And 7, recovery from a natural disaster. Mr. Speaker, as I said earlier on, in closing, every member on the government side spoke about the experiences in health and people they assisted, and we are very happy that the government gave the support to our citizens. But let us not create that agency, Mr. Speaker, and weaken government institutions that have the human resource capacity and the structure to empower people. Once again, Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity.
Mr. Speaker, the bill before us is the Rapid Response Social Recovery Agency Act. It tells us that there is hereby established a body to be known as the Rapid Response Social Recovery Agency for the purpose of performing the functions and carrying out the duties conferred on it under this Act. The agency is a body corporate to which Section 55 of the Interpretation in General Clauses Act applies, meaning, Mr. Speaker, that we are forming a statutory corporation to deal with rapid response to social recovery needs. But, Mr. Speaker, there seems to be a mismatch between what the government says it wants to do and what the actual provisions of the proposed legislation are. We heard, for example, that the public support program, which this agency will replace, has met its objectives. In other words, it has done wonderfully well. And the question then is, why are we doing this? I'm concerned, Mr. Speaker, that in debate this morning so far, members of the other side have spent a lot of time justifying the need for state assistance to the vulnerable. That is not the issue before us. Because before this has come to Parliament, there has been state support for the vulnerable. It precedes this administration. It will succeed this administration as well, because the state has always, through government, provided for its citizens. Over time, things have evolved. And in 18 years in government, I am sure there are a number of things that the Dominica Labour Party will claim credit for, rightfully so, in terms of raising the bar on helping people. But that is life. Things evolve. Things change. The question before us, though, Madam Speaker, is why is it so important for members of the other side to be using this debate to suggest that we over here don't care about people and we don't want to help people? It is totally and absolutely wrong, and the debate would benefit a lot from it if we move away and we focus on the actual provisions of the bill. Because as I said, Mr. Speaker, there is a mismatch between what the government says it wants to do and what the actual provisions of the proposed legislation are. In his presentation this morning on the bill, the Prime Minister told us that interventions for public support are time sensitive. Yep. And he referred to the case of a child born with a defect and has to be flown out of Dominica for medical attention. He said that such requests, let me go back a bit, Mr. Speaker. He said, and I agree, we agree, that such requests cannot be bogged down by bureaucracy. However, this is the legislation for the agency that is going to prevent us from being bogged down by bureaucracy in dealing with time-sensitive requests for assistance from the public purse. What does it provide? Well, let's read the bill, because nobody's paying attention to this. You have a piece of legislation before Parliament that is not going to do what you say it is going to do. As a matter of fact, it is legally going to bind those responsible for delivering the service to a new level of bureaucracy. But nobody in the 18-member cabinet has seen that. So let me tell you what's going on here. Clause 4.1. The agency shall receive and process applications for urgent public support and relief from individuals, non-governmental organizations, community groups, and local government organizations in the areas specified in the first schedule. Some of my colleagues have made reference to those 7 areas in the first schedule. 4.1b says, subject to the availability of funds and resources. And after consultation with the minister, approve applications for public support and relief and provide either wholly or partially financial and technical assistance to individuals, non-governmental organizations, community groups, and local government organizations. Haven't we been speaking here this morning as though the resources
available for assistance are infinite and that nobody will suffer adverse consequences from their not being able to get assistance. But we are reading here, subject to the availability of funds and resources. So we setting up a whole agency. No, but you said, you all are the ones who said, ask whether X or Y will die, or whether X or Y will go hungry, or whether X or Y will stay without a house because they did not get the assistance. Well, if you don't have money, you can't provide the assistance, you know. Huh? Good. No, I know exactly what I'm saying. Let's go on. Mr. Speaker. We heard as well from the Prime Minister that it is not where this agency is placed. It is how effective it is. And I agree with that. Because we have always said that these services can be properly and effectively provided from within the welfare system of the government of Dominica, which is long established. The question is, why are we starting or introducing the statutory corporation, which is going to cost money that could be going towards assisting the very same people who need the assistance? Why the additional cost of running it? We have 18 ministers of government. We have 18 ministries of government. In a land where the economy declined by 4.7% last year and will decline a further 14% this year. But we're thinking of additional expenses, notwithstanding 18 ministries and ministers of government. We're thinking of additional expenses to set up an agency, a special purpose vehicle to deliver public support in a rapid manner. But, Mr. Speaker, here is what a concern is. When we talk about rapid response, we're talking about rapid service delivery. So we need quick decisions. How is the legislation providing for those quick decisions we need? Number one, if you want quick decisions, the world over it is known that you need administrative autonomy, you need efficient staff, and you need professional management. And to get that, you have to give the organization the ability to hire talent, hire capability without political interference. So what have we done? What are we doing with this legislation? Well, 4.2 provides that in considering an application for public support or relief, the agency shall have regard to all relevant matters, including the following. So, the lady who has the child born with a defect comes to the agency, and the law, as of the passage of this piece of legislation, the law will require the Rapid Response Social Recovery Agency to do the following. In consideration of an application for public support or relief, the agency shall have regard to all relevant matters, including the following. To all relevant matters. Shall, not may, shall. The financial capability of the applicant, the number of previously successful applications of applicants, whether the applicant already benefits or is expected to benefit from a government program or project respecting the issue of concern. In other words, Mr. Speaker, what 4.2 does is lays out a scheme for needs assessment. Needs assessment takes time. But in dealing with the application, the applicant, the Rapid Response Social Recovery Agency shall go through the bureaucratic procedure that is necessary to determine whether the person can or should get the assistance. And we heard just now from the Minister for Ecclesiastic Affairs that there are instances of double dipping and triple dipping from the public support program that needs to be dealt with and is being paid attention to in this process. So the question arises, if somebody has dipped and double dipped and is coming to triple dip at the point where the child or cancer kicks in, what is the situation that you're going to allow them to die because they came to triple dip? We have to answer these questions, because what you have spoken about here this morning and all the things you said that the legislation should do and all the concerns about bogged down by bureaucracy, you are in fact introducing a bureaucracy between the minister and the applicant for the assistance from the public purse. Pay attention to these matters. Do not bog yourself down with these nonsensical and untrue statements that the opposition does not want to help poor people. It is wrong, you know it is wrong, stop doing it. But I'm sure that rather than focus on these recommendations to improve the legislation, in summation, we will hear another royal bashing of the opposition and all the concerns about, all the propaganda about not liking poor people and so on. We will hear that, I am predicting. And I'm asking the public to avoid that foolishness. Now, I have a crystal ball. I know exactly what's in front of me. So, Mr. Speaker, it was the Prime Minister who told us that in these matters, there's no political consideration, or political consideration is the least of my consideration, quote unquote. And quote again, there are things that I would play politics with. I'm a politician. We're talking about the Rapid Response Social Recovery Agency. And he referenced that where health matters and so on are concerned, he will not be playing politics, and that's the least of his consideration. But this act provides a Schedule 2 for a number of other areas, and one wonders whether outside of the area of health and recovery, whether those are areas that would allow the intervention of his politics, which he admits he plays because he's a politician, and there are things I will play politics with. Mr. Speaker, we are firmly in support of the assistance that the public needs, members of the public who are vulnerable, who are less fortunate, need from the public purse. But we are also very tightly focused on getting more and more of our people to be able to afford the necessities of their life. I'm sure the government has that on its calendar, on its agenda of things as well. But we must keep the focus on moving our people from welfare into work, where, with a job, they can improve their self-esteem, enjoy the freedom of the human spirit, make their own decisions about the bills they have to pay at the month end, etc. It seems, Mr. Speaker, we have gotten into a position in Dominica that, notwithstanding the government having more and more money, the more money the government seems to have, the more dependent people seem to become on handouts from the government. Now, we have to understand this. It is very important. Some people on the other side are talking about misconception. There's no misconception here. Because there can be no doubt in anybody's mind that this program, the public support program, as operated out of the Prime Minister's office, was operated with the intention of deriving Labour Party political benefits from it. There is no question about that. You all can tell the public otherwise, but that's what the reality is. Deal with it. Which is why what's your ministry now, sir? Mr. Minister, I'll refer to him as the member. I refer to him as the member for the Portsmouth constituency, which is why he's the Minister for Trade. Minister for Trade. Which is why the Minister for Trade was so effusive in his categorization of the program as direct clinic. And that's okay. That's okay. It's the public support program. You're effusive in your praise for the direct clinic. And as far as you're concerned, it is a very successful program. Good. So the purpose of this is not to argue with that. The purpose is to point to you mismatches in what you say you want to do and what this can actually do when the law becomes operative. Because, you are the same members of the parliament that scoffed when an observation was made that in 2016-2017, the public support program had a budget of $1.5 million. And the state ended up spending, through the government, $11.5 million. So that's fine. I'm sure if you satisfy yourself that you're making good decisions and you're not politicizing it and so on, a lot of people were happy, a lot of people were assisted. But you claim you cannot budget for public support. But you who claim you cannot budget for public support, you're setting up an arrangement in law where you're requiring the board, Section 18, the board shall, in such form and by such dates as may be specified by the financial secretary, prepare and submit to the minister estimates of income receivable and the expenditure to be incurred during each financial year, including any supplementary estimates, and the minister shall present estimates to the House of Assembly with such amendments, if any, as he considers necessary. 18.2. Except with the approval of the minister, no further sum shall be expended in any financial year other than that provided in the estimates relating to such financial year. This is a statutory corporation you're forming that is going to be wholly and solely dependent on revenues from the public purse. We understand that. We get that. But here's the point. You're going to be using the same contingency warrants process to get money out of the public purse for emergencies that are above and beyond what the agency has at its disposal. Because, of course, if there's money in the public purse and the agency has run out, it has exceeded its budget of $5 million. You don't want anybody to die, so you're going to trigger the same contingency warrants process through the minister in the parliament. What is the difference from having those arrangements right there in the government of 18 ministers and 18 ministries? What's the problem? Beef up the capability of the welfare department of the Ministry of Social Services. Give it a rapid response social recovery window. You are spending extra money of the state where we're looking for money to help poor people. You're spending that money on new bureaucracy. When you have 18 ministers and ministries of government, it's almost... and rejected members of the Dominica Labour Party that are being paid $80,000 a year. We have that as well. Caution the Minister of Education. Take what back?
Member, I'm going to allow you to continue, but please be guided that you must, not impute improper motives. Continue, please.
I am surprised, Mr. Speaker, that you did not pick up the imputation of improper motives in the aside that came. Well, Mr. Speaker, that is why, Mr. Speaker, that is why the rules provide that when we are on our feet, we ought not to be distracted.
But it's done on both sides. It's done on both sides. Well, and we allow the asides to a certain extent. But don't try and instruct me on the rules. I read them. I know them. So I am allowing you to continue. Just do so.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, there was what we have, Mr. Speaker, is an agency, the proposed work of which can be effectively taken care of within a ministry of government, that we are creating a special purpose vehicle at additional expense to the state to set up this rapid response social recovery agency. I'm saying it is totally and absolutely unnecessary. And given the provisions of this bill that have been put forward, the solutions that it's supposed to be coming up with, and what the government has concerns about, don't match. What we have is a piece of legislation and a proposed agency of the minister, by the minister, for the minister, with no concern at all about the necessity or the usefulness of bipartisanship. So how can you come to this honorable house with a straight face and say you're not playing politics? Where's the bipartisan populism? Yeah? So you're going to take on some ideas for improving the bill? Huh? So, Mr. Speaker, Speaker.
Members, please.
Mr. Speaker.
Members, please.
We
Let's have
need,
some order.
in focusing on the bill, please, members of the government side, consider carefully what is it you say you want to do. And consider carefully what is it the legislation is going to constrain the operatives within that proposed rapid response social recovery agency to do. Because you may find that you end up with an impossible situation where the rapid response you want is bogged down in the same bureaucracy that you seem to be running away from, and giving people the impression, which is very unfortunate, when you refer to the public sector that serves with you, you are constantly indicating that they're not capable of rapid response in emergency circumstances. It is not fair.
You have 4 more minutes.
I need some more time. Where Mr. Scared? Where Mr. Scared? No, it's okay. Mr. Speaker, hush. So, what we are saying is that you, at this stage, cannot be considering that you, 18 members of government, with 18 ministers, you can't count, man. You had 17 ministers of government before. A parliamentary secretary is not a minister of government. Or is he? Or no? A parliamentary secretary is not a minister of government. There are 18 ministers of government, including the new addition to the cabinet. And with 18 ministers of government, you're telling the people of Dominica, you find it impossible to locate within an appropriate ministry a rapid response social recovery window to take care of special assistance to people in times of emergency. I think based on that alone, you also just pack up and go. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Let me go, man. Let me go. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make a very brief contribution to the measure that is before this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, before I deal with the substantive issue, I want to deal with some of the misinformation that has been coming from the opposition side, and more so from the member for Salisbury and the leader of the opposition. Because, Mr. Speaker, we're dealing here with a rapid response social recovery program. Of course, it is quite evident that the leader of the opposition is void of basic understanding to the extent that it is his view that what we are presenting is contrary to the legislation that we are attempting to enact. But of course, that does not surprise anyone, because we are well aware of his level as far as understanding is concerned. Madam Speaker, he, in his deliberation, speaks to the fact that there are 18 ministers who have proven themselves incapable of delivering to the Dominican public. But Madam Speaker, or Mr. Speaker, this is somewhat amazing, because while the leader of the opposition derides us, 18 of us, could this be the same leader of the opposition who, after Erica, told the Dominican public that he wanted to be part of this government to the extent of being prime minister, or be responsible, Mr. Speaker, for dealing with the reconstruction? Could it be?
The member is... The question...
Are you rising on a point of order?
Huh?
No, I need to know what the member is rising on. Is it on a point of order?
What's that? If you don't know, just sit down, man. Mr. Speaker,
Are you rising on a point of order?
Yeah, the member in contravention of the rules, the rules of debate, has been stating matters, that making statements that are blatantly untrue about another member.
Are you rising on a point of order?
That is an imputation of improper motives under the rules of debate.
All right. Well, member.
So, Mr. Speaker, the facts are there for all of us. The facts are there, Mr. Speaker, for all of us to prove that this very leader of the opposition, who condemns us, 18 of us, that it is and was and continues to be his sole purpose in life to be prime minister, to the extent after Erica, his only desire was to become a minister or the prime minister, Mr. Speaker, and the minister of finance. But, of course, we all recognize, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, we all understand that the sole purpose, the sole motive of the opposition is all about themselves and not the people of this country. But, Madam Speaker, I find it mind-boggling that these very members of the opposition hail all other Caribbean islands. They hail them as the best jurisdictions, the United States of America. Madam Speaker, and as a matter of fact, you have heard them come time and time into this parliament and condemn our social programs. They have condemned all of the interventions that we have made to assist the average man and the poor people of this country. And of course, all of us understand and realize the absolute hatred that they have for poor people, so that when we put mechanisms in place to assist these poor people, Madam Speaker, they have a problem with that. But yet, these are the very people who hail the United States of America. Madam Speaker, research proves that the mighty United States of America has no less than 6 major welfare programs. In France, Madam Speaker, 30% of the GDP is spent on welfare. And Madam Speaker, I should add that in the United States of America, $64.9 million is spent annually on social programs. And this morning you heard the Minister for Environment speak to even countries like Saudi Arabia, Madam Speaker. But here in Dominica, they have a problem when we seek to assist the poor people of this country. One must ask, and the Dominican people must ask, what is the intention of the opposition? But, Madam Speaker, we will not allow ourselves to be distracted. We are on a mission, and we will ensure that we meet the needs of the Dominican people, our constituents who have elected us to represent them. Now, Madam Speaker, you heard the member for Salisbury, Honorable Hector John, seek to mislead and misguide the people of Dominica by saying that the agency or the requests that are to be considered by the agency should provide for only 2 areas: health and recovery from natural disasters. So as far as he's concerned, all of the other areas contained in the first schedule should be done away with. And his question was, what does that have to do in education? First of all, they have not understood that this is about the timely delivery of financial resources or intervention. And, Madam Speaker, it is a rapid response. In other words, the resources are provided at the time when they are needed most. And so, to use any other of the current systems that we have would not adequately provide for the needs of the Dominican people when required. And Madam Speaker, I'm very happy that all of the opposition benches are empty. Because a minute ago, Madam Speaker, in your absence, when an aside was made as to the operation of the constituency offices, you heard the leader of the opposition go up in a frenzy and accuse certain individuals here. But Madam Speaker, while the state pays these individuals who think that the only place they ought to work is in Parliament, and Madam Speaker, for the last 7 months, we heard them chiding and groaning, crying and lamenting for the convening of Parliament. Today, here we are in this Parliament and the seats are empty. But Madam Speaker, I want to show to the Dominican people that while Honorable Hector John, the member for Salisbury who has walked out with his leader, believes that only 2 areas should be provided for, he couldn't be more wrong. And that is misleading the people of Dominica. He says that education has nothing to do with rapid response, and there can be nothing that qualifies one to receive a rapid response in education. Madam Speaker, just think with me for one moment that here it is, we have a single mother with 4 children at the Salisbury Primary School. Madam Speaker, the father of these 4 children has vowed to the mother of his children that he will take care of the school fees. 2 of these children attend the ITSS, Madam Speaker. Yes. Now, of course, it demonstrates to us clearly that the member for Salisbury and the opposition do not understand what happens on ground with our Dominican people. So 2 of these children are at ITSS. And Madam Speaker, for the first term of school, their fees were not paid. The school fees were not paid. And the principal has actually written to the parent. Term number 2, and the school fees are still not paid, Madam Speaker. So the school resorts to sending these children home. Madam Speaker, for the non-payment of school fees by these 2 children, they are out of school, Madam Speaker, while others are enjoying the privilege. This father sits on the block every day with a Guinness in his hand, and the children are out. What does the mother do? And Madam Speaker, one of these children is due to write the CXC exams. If the fees are not paid, you cannot return to the classroom. Now, should we go through one of the ministries or maybe the social welfare division, Madam Speaker, it will take a minimum of 1 month for that child's need to be addressed. And that can jeopardize the entire future of that child because she will not write the CSEC exams. So, Madam Speaker, the resort naturally is to go to what they have called the Red Clinic, the public support system, Madam Speaker, so that a rapid injection of funds, be it $200 or $2,000, will be provided within a period of 48 hours. And of course, that could be less. It could be 2 hours. And this family now has peace of mind. And that child can continue her schooling, and her future, Madam Speaker, is saved. All because of this program, which the opposition seeks to condemn and criticize, Madam Speaker, because they fail to understand the realities that face our people in the various villages around Dominica. Madam Speaker, I don't know how else I should explain it to the opposition, but to my mind, there is need for education to be included. Madam Speaker, not only so, but just imagine with me one moment that a student at the Dominica State College, and she lives in Marigot, the constituency, the village that the opposition leader comes from. And for whatever reason, the tuition fees are not paid. Now, the Ministry of Education would address the issue of the tuition fees. But, Madam Speaker, when transportation is not paid, the bus driver is left without a choice after 2 or 3 months to put that child off his bus. Madam Speaker, again, the entire future of that child is in danger. Through this rapid response mechanism, Madam Speaker, the transportation fees can now be addressed. And Madam Speaker, I don't understand how the member for Salisbury or the opposition leader believes that that should appear as a health matter when it has to do with the education of the child. But Madam Speaker, most don't understand, but I do, because we understand the levels at which they operate. This cannot be a health issue, and so there is need for education to be included, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we heard them speak to the fact that only health and recovery from natural disasters should be included. Well, let's look at item 5 under the first schedule, access to water or sanitary facilities, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this young lady from Wesley, she has gone to her pal rep because the father of her children is not living up to his commitments. She has gone to the pal rep to assist her because she's in danger of being evicted from the house for non-payment of rent. Madam Speaker, her telephone bill is not paid, her water bill is not paid. And Madam Speaker, some good angel has helped her with the rent. Some uncle of hers has taken care of the telephone bill, but her water is still not paid. She has gone to her pal rep, and her pal rep says, well, it's only in Parliament I can represent you. I cannot help you. Go and check Skerrit and the boys. So, Madam Speaker, she must naturally find her way into Roseau. And here it is, we now have the Rapid Response Social Recovery Program agency to deal with the issue of the non-payment of her water bill. And Madam Speaker, within 12 hours, she receives $2,000. She can now pay the water bill, and Duwasco reconnects her. Madam Speaker, I want the opposition to tell Dominica, how could this be a health issue or one that deals with recovery from a natural disaster? Madam Speaker, it has to do with access to water and sanitary facilities. Dr. Darrow, Honorable Darrow. So, Madam Speaker, we see that this is an opposition who has nothing to do except condemn and criticize, disseminate misinformation with one objective, one sole purpose: to mislead the Dominican people. And Madam Speaker, while on the issue of education, as Minister for Education for the past 8 years, and having served as Parliamentary Secretary in Education for 3.5 years, a total of 11.5 years, Madam Speaker, I have seen countless parents come to the Ministry of Education. Their children are studying out of state. And Madam Speaker, recently we had a case with a popular young man in Roseau and his child's mother, where the child studying out of state was taken ill. Madam Speaker, they did not want us to pay for the hospital bill, since that was being addressed by a friendly government of ours where the child was studying. But Madam Speaker, they needed to get to Cuba urgently to be there with the child. And of course, within the Ministry of Education, we did what we had to do, but then we had to call the office of the Prime Minister to get air tickets to get this couple into Cuba within 24 hours, Madam Speaker. Should we have said to this couple, we cannot help you, let your child alone? Madam Speaker, yet we hear the opposition coming here and attempting to convince the Dominican people that that program is going to be ineffective. I say to the Dominican public that this is one of the most effective programs that we will see instituted by this administration, Madam Speaker. In fact, Madam Speaker, I said I was going to be brief, so let me see if I can end. This is not happening by accident, what you see being demonstrated by the opposition, and I'll tell you why. We have heard the opposition time and time again coming in this honorable house crying out for change. They did it, Madam Speaker, with the issue of cleaning of the voters' list. Madam Speaker, they called for change, electoral reform. And Madam Speaker, when this administration gave them what they were calling for, we saw that they did not come to the parliament, but rather they were inciting people, and their agents were out there inciting people on the streets to revolt against this administration. In fact, the leader of the opposition left this honorable house, and from here, we could hear his voice inciting the crowds to rebellion. So they call for change. When change is given, Madam Speaker, they cannot deal with the change. They called for change in the structure of what they call the Red Clinic. And Madam Speaker, here it is. We are giving them the desired change in the structure. They asked for legislation because they said the Prime Minister had a briefcase under his table. People walked into his office. He would dip his hand and give them monies. They wanted structure. Now that we have given them structure, yes, my colleague minister, checks and balances are put in place. Madam Speaker, they have a problem with it. So the issue here is not about what they want. It's about what they do not want. And so, Madam Speaker, I end my contribution this afternoon by saying to us, the only thing that they do not want is the Labour Party government. But, Madam Speaker, Kiovle, Kiopavle, whether they want it or whether they do not want it, they will be saddled with the Labour Party government under Roosevelt's carrot for a very, very long time, Madam Speaker, because we ain't going nowhere, Madam Speaker. The people have confidence in this administration. So if Labour is an albatross on the back of the opposition leader, he will have to continue life until he departs this planet with that albatross on his back, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the truth of the matter is, you look at the opposition, and I often say to my people that oftentimes we speak of people being hypocritical or hypocrites. Madam Speaker, I have coined a new term. Yes, sir. You cannot consider them to be hypocritical, Madam Speaker, because when it's hot, they call for it cold. And when it's cold, they want it hot, Madam Speaker. So when it's in, they want it out. When you give it to them out, they want it in, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, I think that our English language has failed us in describing the leader of the opposition and the United Workers' Party. They are not hypocritical, Madam Speaker. When a child is extremely active, Madam Speaker, you know full well, you say the child is hyperactive, Dr. Darrow. They are not hypocritical. They are over, above, and beyond hypocritical. They are hypercritical, Madam Speaker. And because of that, the Dominican people know who they are. And so, because they are out, they will never be in. And because now they appear to be hot, they will always remain in the cold, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, I have absolutely no reservation in supporting this measure, because as it did for me, the Red Clinic did for me back in 2009, when I had a constituent, and I remember then there was a senator from La Plaine who was here, and then he was minister. He could not help the gentleman, one of his very strong, I mean, when you talk of strong supporters, this man had a growth, Madam Speaker. He would have probably been down in the cold grave today, but for the intervention of the Red Clinic. And the Prime Minister approved $120,000 for this gentleman to go to California to do surgery. And today he's in the United States working for and on behalf of the United Workers' Party, Madam Speaker. On that basis, I say, let's go forward and push through with the legislation, ensure that it becomes law so that my people can get relief when they need it most. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
It all depends. I have to go to a funeral, so that's okay. Yeah. Madam Speaker, thank you very much, Senator Ed. Madam Speaker, I rise to support this measure. And I must say, Madam Speaker, it is very difficult for an ordinary man to speak after a politician slash pastor. Absolutely very difficult. Madam Speaker, I was trying not to be emotional here today. But something is happening in this honorable house. And I call on Dominicans to turn their attention to this debate that is currently taking place in this honorable house. The intention of this intended legal facility, Madam Speaker, has been clearly spelled out by the presenter, the Prime Minister, Honorable Roosevelt Scarritt. And a number of speakers who have spoken before me have actually made reference to the salient aspects as per the intended measure before this honorable house. But I intend, Madam Speaker, briefly to speak about two issues that I think that need to be given currency in this debate. One, the morality of this intended measure, and two, the sharp contrast and distinction between the United Workers' Party and the Labour Party. I think it is absolutely critical to understand that. Madam Speaker, yesterday, very interestingly, the Senator Monel Williams, Madam Speaker, spoke like an angel. He did not speak like a Dominican. Very smooth, wonderful voice, yanking, captivating. And she said something that was very important to me as a social scientist. She said, Madam Speaker, she supports the practicality of the intended measure But in principle, she doesn't support it. That is, in my view, tantamount to a man proposing to his girlfriend to get married, and the girlfriend responds and says, I support the practicality of the marriage, but in principle, I don't want to get married to you.
Yes, blacks.
Yes,
blacks, boy.
Madam Speaker,
Yes,
Madam Speaker,
Yes, that was good.
then you had the leader of the opposition. Suddenly, Madam Speaker, he supports the social program and therefore calls for creating a window within the existing infrastructure within the government apparatus, namely within the Ministry of Social Services. And he spoke also as an angel. While I was coming to Parliament this morning, I met an elderly person, a lady, and she said to me, Madam Speaker, Mr. Blackmore, merci Workers' Party par un gouvernement. Puis à présent, Dominica tika successeur. Madam Speaker, I want to translate except for one word, susi. And it says, Madam Speaker, because I don't want to get myself into any trouble in this honorable house. So, thank you that the Workers' Party is not in office. Because if they were, now Dominicans would be sucking salt. And that is true, Madam Speaker. It is one thing to speak as an angel. And I want to refer, Madam Speaker, if you permit me, to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 1. If I speak in tongues of men or angels, but do not have love, lamu, love, I'm only a resounding of a clanging cymbal. You know what I mean, Madam Speaker?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
One moment, please. The asides on the floor,
all right.
they are getting very loud.
Yeah, them.
Okay?
Madam Speaker.
Members must understand life is a two-way street.
Thank you very much.
What you don't want for yourself, you should not want for others. Yes. I was watching on television out there, and I saw what was happening. And I heard members saying, oh, Mr. Speaker, get them to stop for me to speak and this sort of thing. Well, it works both ways. So I'm going to ask members, please, if you have to make an aside, can you make it quietly? Don't tell me I have to give whispering lessons now.
You must not only speak about love, but it has to be manifested in your deeds and manifestation. And that is what the Labour Party is all about. Madam Speaker, I do not profess to be a priest or a pastor. My father was a deacon, and my wife is soon to be a deacon. I get my blessings every morning. And so, Madam Speaker, I have some understanding of the Bible. Madam Speaker, thank God. And Dominicans must be saying that right now. That at our lowest point in our existence in this country, that you have a government in that of the Labour Party. Madam Speaker, when you listen to the discussion on this measure in this honorable house, you can see a sharp contrast between what the Workers' Party stands for, well, it stands for nothing, and what the Labour Party stands for. For one, Madam Speaker, the Workers' Party, the members of the Workers' Party do not know, do not understand, and do not care for the constituents. The only relationship, according to them, is to get the votes of the people of Dominica. But one comes to stand for them at the lowest point, they're in hiding. And I'm so happy, Madam Speaker, that we have a Prime Minister, and then you have members on this side, all of whom who have hearts, human hearts, Madam Speaker. That's right. Human hearts. And if you go back to the formation of the Labour Party in 1959, founded on a fundamental core principle of standing up for your little man, the downtrodden, the most vulnerable in our mix, Madam Speaker. And almost 60 years thereafter, Madam Speaker, you have a Prime Minister and parliamentarians on that side who, by the policies and programs, exemplify the fundamental principle upon which this great party was formed almost 60 years ago. That is the distinction that has to be made, Madam Speaker. And it's important, therefore, that we in Dominica do not take these things for granted, Madam Speaker, because they can disappear. And having listened to the angels, nice voices, wonderful, but when you listen to the substance coming from the utterances, very toxic and very frightening to the most vulnerable in our mix. The question, therefore, that Dominicans should ask themselves, going forward, Madam Speaker, if the Workers' Party were to form the government, what is going to happen to this new measure that we are about to enact in Parliament? And they must therefore answer the question to the Dominican people and to us in this honorable House, whether they will repeal, Madam Speaker, or keep this intended act that is intended, Madam Speaker, to bring relief to the most vulnerable in our mix. Now, the Minister for Education made reference to the interventions made by the member for Salisbury, Honorable Hector John. And he's made reference to the fact that education should not be part of one of the interventions. But, Madam Speaker, it was appropriate for him at the time to seek to get a rapid response from the Prime Minister for himself. For himself, Madam Speaker. And he alone wanted $150,000. He alone, Madam Speaker. But for the poor
Madam
and
Speaker,
vulnerable.
on a point of order, the Minister knows that is not true. Yes, ma'am.
Your comment gets rising on.
Madam Speaker, imputing improper motive.
What?
The Minister.
Improper motive in what way?
It's not true. What he said is not true, Madam Speaker.
Not true or true is not improper motive. It's when the person says you're doing something that could get you in criminal problem. That's what improper motive is.
Madam Speaker.
Please take your seat. I've ruled. Member, continue.
Said I'll try my best not to be emotional, and I am not able to sign to carbon copy his signature. But these fellows are very brave. These angels on the other side, they're very, very brave. Because when you sit and you take a time and you write a letter and sign it, and then you stand up in this honorable House on a point of order, the Dominican public should be listening to that and watching them fellows. Absolutely dangerous, Madam Speaker. So, just going back to the fundamental issue before this honorable House. Going back to the morality of this measure, Madam Speaker, and the member for La Plaine, the Minister for Education, referenced that. But I wanted to just speak about that briefly before I end, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, sickness and death, all of us must encounter during our life on earth. But, Madam Speaker, one should not be left to die because that person is poor. And you know, Madam Speaker, once somebody has a serious ailment, every minute or every second is critical to that person's survival. So can you imagine, Madam Speaker, you heard the Prime Minister said yesterday that sometimes, Madam Speaker, somebody has to be airlifted to Martinique or Guadeloupe by the air ambulance, and then the pilots, before they move, they have to get the money in their hand, l'argent cherche. Now, if you have to go to undertake, Madam Speaker, to go through, Madam Speaker, heart surgery, or you have some fluid in your brain, every second counts. So what this matter seeks to do is to facilitate and to expedite the process, to save lives. That is what the Labour Party is all about. So the Workers' Party, notwithstanding the fact that they speak as angels, all of them, the member for Rosa South, the member for Marigot, the member for Salisbury, the member for Wesley, the Senator Manuel Chas, every one of them is against this measure, and every one of them is against the poor people of this country, and they have to be indicted for that, Madam Speaker. And they have to be called out on that, Madam Speaker. And I say, Madam Speaker, that, I can defend myself, partner. You know that. Anytime, anywhere. I can even boot too. Don't get me started. Boot in. That's what I know. So when you're looking for a trouble there, you come. Every part of me, you have to be very careful with me. I ain't chopping, partner, I ain't chopping no man. I ain't chopping no man, my friend. When you tackle partner, you're looking for serious trouble. Head to toe is what happened, my friend. Serious. Don't get me vexed that I don't want to become with tackle and I. Anytime, anywhere. Madam Speaker, going back, Madam Speaker, to the matter before this Honorable House, Madam Speaker, I want to say thank you to the Prime Minister and the Labour Party administration. Madam Speaker, 2 weeks ago, a young lady from my constituency came to the financial center and said she wanted to see her power rep and the Prime Minister to say thank you. I'm not sure if this young lady supports me, but we're not really concerned about that. We're concerned about assisting the people of Dominica, Madam Speaker. And she had gone through a serious vehicular accident, Madam Speaker, and she was told that it made no sense that she was going to be amputated. I went to the Prime Minister, and I spoke to the Prime Minister, and I said to the Prime Minister, we need, Honorable Prime Minister, to send this lady to Martinique as quickly as possible. I was in direct contact with the official in the hospital. And she went, although her mobility is still impaired, Madam Speaker, but she still has a leg, Madam Speaker. She still has a leg. How can an elected member be against that, Madam Speaker? And there are so many wonderful stories that can be told, Madam Speaker, insofar as this program is concerned. And that is why I call on the Dominican public to follow the discussion in this Honorable House and to identify all the persons who are opposing this important measure and to call them out, Madam Speaker. And let me say in closing that one should not be left to die because that person is poor. The Labour Party will continue to honor the fundamental core principle upon which this party was formed almost 60 years ago. And I'm saying, as I end, Madam Speaker, from the Prime Minister down to Senator Ed, your names will be inscribed in the political literature of this country for being there for the most vulnerable in our mix, Madam Speaker. History will recognize our contribution, Madam Speaker. And for those of you who believe that it's okay not to care for the most vulnerable, I want to say to you that life is a boomerang. What goes around comes around. Short Shadow said that. What goes around comes around. So, I'm asking you, every one of you, to go through this transition and to follow, Madam Speaker, the example set by the member for Roseau Central, the Honorable Minister Joseph Isaac, and to make this transition, member for Roseau South, from a hard heart to a heart with human flesh and blood. Love, love, lamb, lamb. And I quote again, Madam Speaker, as I end, for the many angels who speak about love but do not show it by their deeds and manifestation. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 1. If I speak in tongues of men or angels, but do not have love, I'm only a resounding or a clanging cymbal. Ponder on that, my dear friends, and come back to the fore and remember where you're coming from. Never, never forget where you're coming from, and never turn the doors of opportunities on the less fortunate, my dear friends. Madam Speaker, I support this measure. I am proud to be part of this administration. I'm proud to be led by a leader with a human heart, and I'm proud to be a member of a party, the only party in this country with a core fundamental and principle that is grounded in the upliftment of the downtrodden and the most vulnerable economics, the Dominica Labour Party, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much.
Madam Speaker, I move that the House be suspended until 6 p.m. this evening.
Seconded, Madam Speaker.
It has been moved and seconded that this honorable House be suspended until 6 p.m. this evening. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? This honorable House shall be suspended until 6 p.m. this evening.
Madam Speaker!
We have a funeral to attend. A funeral to attend.